The room was dimly lit but bright enough that they illuminated Chantal's face. And the boy beside her, with his body tucked protectively against hers. When I burst in, she looked up, her eyes wide with fear. That fear dissolved into relief when she saw it was me, but that relief soon gave way to something else, guilt. Any doubt I had about the boy evaporated. He can't be my son? She looked away, pulling the boy closer. Lorraine's goon was right behind me, and at her command, he went forward to untie Chantal and the boy. He straightened and turned to Lorraine with a frown. "But ma'am..." "Don't ask stupid questions, Martin. You can leave now. Your job is finished here. You can tell me others, I'll send your money tomorrow." Martin shrugged and left the room. A moment later, his receding footsteps echoed on the cracking concrete ground. Paul raised a brow at Lorraine. "You are very optimistic. Are you sure you will be free this time tomorrow?" Lorraine glared at him, her lips curling in a sneer. "Get your filthy hands off me!" Paul ignored her until she snatched her hands away from him. "Untie me." Paul looked at me for confirmation. I waved my hand absently. I heard Lorraine grunting and demanding that Paul shouldn't touch her any longer than necessary. I couldn't pay any attention to them even if I tried. My eyes were rooted to the unfolding truth before me, a confusing truth that I had a hard time believing. From my peripheral vision, I saw Lorraine strut to stand beside me. She crossed her arms and cast a disdainful glance at Chantal, who was now getting up, bringing the boy up with her. He was crying softly and shaking against her. A sharp, harsh laugh escaped Lorraine. "This is the slut you claim to love, darling Nolan." "I tried to tell you," she shrugged. "I tried to warn you, but they say love is blind." She took a step toward them. Although Chantal stood her ground, the little boy stepped to hide behind her. "The love of your life," Lorraine continued with disgust, "is a bitch. Do you know how she got that little brat hiding like a coward behind her?" "He is a child. My son. Not a coward. Not a brat, you sadistic plastic bitch." Lorraine made a flick with her fingers. "Whatever. Anyway, Nolan. She steals people's boyfriends, gets pregnant for them, and they end up dumping her." She walked into Chantal's face. "You let my fiancé bend you over a desk like a cheap slut." Coming from a girl getting her pussy eaten by her friend's boyfriend. "Well, at least I didn't give birth to a bastard." "He's my son." Both women stopped talking at once, both turning to look at me. One had a look of surprise on her face, the other guilt. At least Chantal wasn't denying it. That would have hurt even more. Lorraine let out a long hysterical laugh. Bending over, she held her belly, still laughing hard like she had just heard the funniest thing. "Oh, Nolan. You don't have to defend her honor just to spite me. She's a slut. This is all part of her plan to do what she always does." Paul had moved closer, he was passing curious glances between the little boy and me. He puffed out a sigh and shook his head knowingly. Anyone could see that the boy looked like me. The teary green eyes peering from behind Chantal could easily have been mine. "Lorraine," Chantal bit out through her teeth. "Your insults mean nothing to me anymore. You used to be a lot smarter, but if you weren't as stupid as you are right now, you would see that Nolan is Nolan's father?" That wiped a fraction of the smile off her face. "Nolan?" "Yes, Nolan. All those years ago when you fucked my boyfriend behind my back on my birthday, and God knows when else, I went to Nolan for comfort. Yes. I went to him drunk, and we had sex on his couch. Remember when I became pregnant? When you started that rumor that I was a stripper at the local bar? I was carrying his baby. I was carrying Nolan Jr. With every word out of her mouth, Lorraine's eyes grew wider and her jaw dropped. "This can't be possible," came the quiet reply. "You are lying. You never knew Nolan until you showed up in our lives after all these years." "That's where you are wrong. You've just confirmed how much of a selfish brat you've been since forever. If you weren't blinded by your own narcissism, you would have remembered that Nolan was my neighbor. Remember the awkward kid who lived next door?" I winced a little at Chantal's bluntness, but in all honesty, I was the awkward kid. Chantel jabbed a finger in my direction, still not looking into my eyes. That was Nolan. A corner of Lorraine's mouth turned down, whether in disgust or disbelief, I couldn't tell. But she looked at me with a new look in her eyes. Hippy Skippy? Genius. Lorraine's shock couldn't have been more than mine, especially since I never knew that for 7 years that I was a father. Still, her jaw was slack in shock. I can't believe this. Chantel's gaze finally slid towards mine. She blinked back tears as if to look away, but stubbornly held my gaze. I'm tired of running, Nolan. I was on my way to your house to tell you the truth. I didn't anticipate the abduction. I was going to tell you. I wanted to apologize to you 7 years ago for the way I came at you that night. But before I knew it, it was too late. You left town and I was pregnant. I was pregnant and alone with no means of letting you know about your son. After everything that happened with my ex-boyfriend, I vowed not to let anyone get too close again. I didn't feel worthy of affection or anything. Worst of all, I lost myself. I lost the girl I used to be because I honestly believed I lost my self-esteem. But you... Tears ran down her cheeks. I ached to reach out and wipe them away, to caress the bruise on her cheek, but I didn't want to interrupt her little speech. You make me feel loved. I never thought our paths would cross again. I didn't think fate would bring us together again. The little boy, Nolan, came out from behind her then, peering at me with curious green eyes. Though he held on to Chantel nervously with one hand, there was a hint of Chantel's stubborn determination in his eyes. Are you my daddy? A lump rose in my throat. He was a smart little kid. He didn't deserve to be thrown into a grown-up's mess like this. I bent to his level and nodded. Yes. Yes, I am your daddy. He looked up at Chantel, who nodded. Then he looked back at me with a watery smile. He didn't run into my arms. He just stood looking at me with quiet admiration in his eyes. Regardless, Lorraine said in a steely voice now that her initial surprise was gone. I don't care about your past or your awkwardness then, all I care about is who you are now. You are Nolan Pierce, son of Simone Pierce, and my fiancé. I will marry you if it's the last thing I do. Wrong. It is the one thing you will not be doing, I answered. Let's go, I said to Chantel. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You don't think I'll leave you here with this psychopath after this abduction, do you? I took her hand. I was still mad. Why wouldn't I be? All this time she couldn't tell me about my son. Not even yesterday? But now was not the time to think about that. I pulled her closer, she took the boy's hand. Turning to Paul, I said, let's go. We had barely crossed the threshold when Lorraine found her voice again. You can't do this, Nolan. The contract. I am done with the contract. I whirled on her. She didn't flinch at the intensity in my tone. Her smile was dark and evil. Nolan, that contract is the only reason your name still means shit. Without that contract and my dad's money, you are nothing but the son of a murderer. The reminder made me flinch. It was a low blow from her, also an attempt to make me feel guilty, but right now I was beyond concerned about such empty threats. Do your worst. I tossed carelessly over my shoulder, leading Chantel and Nolan, my son, out of the room. Paul was right behind us. I will. I promise you, Nolan Pierce, that I will. Lorraine screamed behind us. We went downstairs to the place where the car was parked. Paul sat in the front passenger seat while Chantel and Nolan sat in the back. There was another car that hadn't been there when we arrived with Lorraine's goons standing beside it. Lucky for her. I wasn't about to take her back to town in my car where she could scream and throw her venom. Deep inside I knew I was playing with fire, double-crossing Douglas. Lorraine is his prized jewel and I don't doubt her promise to make my life miserable, which is why, first thing tomorrow, I will meet with him to cancel the contract and pay whatever debt I owe. If he truly is a friend of my dad as he claims, he should help without forcing me to continue with the facade. Otherwise, I might have to let my dad's empire rot in hell and start a life of my own. The car was quiet as we made a quick return journey to town. Paul kept glancing back at the little boy who was now asleep in Chantal's lap. When he glanced at me, I clenched my jaw. Fortunately, we got home quickly. It was past midnight. Paul said a solemn good night. "We will talk tomorrow, man," and left in his car. I opened the back door and took Nolan's sleeping form from Chantal. My son. In my arms. He melted against me and my throat tightened. Chantal pulled her hand away before our skin could make contact. She limped toward the door with me since her legs had been tied tight. The urge to find Lorraine and rip her apart for doing this to her tore through me. It was a miracle I wasn't howling and raging after everything that just happened. Then again, maybe it was that look of guilt in Chantal's eyes that kept me from giving in to that urge. I took Nolan to the room a few feet away from mine. It was clean, and the sheets were thankfully neat. I gave Chantal some privacy to tuck him in, and she took her sweet time doing so. When she came out of the room, I was waiting with my back against the wall. "We need to talk." "I know," she responded weakly. There was a porch down the hallway, attached to the side of the building. I led the way, pushed the door, and stepped into the moonwashed porch. There were seats in the fairly large space, but I ignored them and went for the railings looking over the property with Chantal behind me. How do I begin? There was so much to say. "I'm sorry, Nolan." Her voice was soft. "Why did you keep my son from me?" I asked. "You moved, and I was confused. I was mad at you, mad at me for making that decision that night, but I never regretted it for once because having Nolan in my life, it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Her words were sincere. The softness of her voice made me ache. I turned around to look at her. She was hugging herself against the slight draft in the air. "Even after we met again? Did you still feel confused then?" She nodded. "I was worried that now that you were no longer the Nolan I used to know, now that you were rich and all, you would try to take my son from me. But these past few days, I was confused, Nolan." She sobbed. "I was trying to protect him, but I was doing it all wrong. His friends are beginning to make fun of him at school, and I just don't know." The same thing had happened to me as a child. I remember the constant bullying and mocking. The names I was called because I didn't know my father. The thought that my son had to endure that too was saddening. "We made him together, Chantal. There is no way I would have tried to forcefully take him away from you." "I see that now. I want you. I want my son in my life. I won't let any child of mine go through what I did as a child. I want Nolan in my life as much as I want you. I want to make you both happy." The tears flowed harder. She limped towards me. I caught her and pulled her against my chest. "I can't deny you your son, but what about you? Lorraine is going to ruin you. I can't ruin your life, Nolan. Go back to her for your sake." I shut up her with a kiss, tasting the salty tears on her lips. "She can't ruin me any more than she already has. But you heal me and I want you in my life. But we'll deal with whatever plans she cooks up together. Do you trust me, sweetheart?" She nodded vigorously. "Good. That's all I need. I can't wait to put this night behind us." I took her hand and led her inside. She held me back for a bit. She was still sobbing softly. Putting her arms around my neck, she hugged me tight. "I love you." Those words were enough to render me senseless for a minute. I stopped long enough to show her just how much I loved her in a kiss. I woke up the next morning to the sound of an anime theme echoing loudly from downstairs. For a second, I thought I was back home with Sophie singing along with the TV while either cooking breakfast for Nolan or chowing down a huge bowl of cereal, until I felt the unfamiliar sheets of the bed and noticed the unfamiliar curtains, walls, and artwork hanging on them. Then, last night came to me. The abduction. Nolan. Lorraine, the truth, the resolution. Nolan still wanted me after everything that happened, and he wanted his son too. It was enough to send my heart fluttering wildly in my chest and warmth diffusing through my veins. My wrists still burned with a slight throbbing pain caused by the ropes that had been used to restrain me digging into my flesh, although the headache from yesterday was gone. I only hope Nolan didn't get bruises on his wrists and ankles. The need to see him made me rise. Pushing the extremely soft blanket aside, I set my feet on the cold floor, slid them into equally soft bedroom slippers, and padded downstairs. The song melted into someone yelling something in Japanese. I paused on the landing. The image in front of me was something from a storybook. Nolan and Nolan were eating cereals from huge bowls, a half-empty box in front of them. Both were transfixed by the scenes playing off the screen. Nolan looked a lot more relaxed, although he still cast uncertain glances at Nolan from time to time, and this Nolan responded to with reassuring smiles. He reached over to ruffle my baby's hair. Nolan looked up and caught me staring. He grinned, and my heart fluttered again. How can one man look so good? He whispered something to Nolan, to which he responded with a laugh and a nod without looking away from the TV screen. Nolan stood and took the stairs in twos to join me on the landing. Putting strong arms around my waist, he drew me in for a kiss that had me curling my toes and leaning for more. When he pulled back, there was a knowing smile on his face. I pinched his back playfully. It's not even 24 hours, and you both are already as thick as thieves. What plans were you both concocting? He nipped my nose. None of your business. Besides, we've been up for hours. I thought we should plot while Mommy sleeps. I gasped dramatically. Okay, this is how it is now, eh? I pulled away from him, but one tug from him brought me back into his arms. Strong warm hands covered my ass and squeezed as his lips found mine again. This time I felt his erection growing against my belly. When he pulled back, he let out a sigh. I don't think I can ever get enough of you. I'm surprised I could keep my hands away from you last night. You were awake last night? He nodded. Awake and horny. Then his eyes darkened. I was thinking. Before I could ask what he was thinking about, he grinned. I think Nolan would like to tell you something. The sound of heavy thumping brought my energetic son running and tumbling into Nolan and me. Nolan's strong hands reached out to catch him before I could. Nolan gazed at him with adoring eyes. Thanks, Dad, he said softly, and something in my heart melted. Nolan exchanged a glance with me. His eyes were wild with joy. Mommy, Nolan tugged on the nightshirt I was wearing. It belonged to Nolan. Yes, my baby. I reached down to lift him into my arms, but he pulled back and waved my hand away, making muttered comments about being a big boy now and that big boys should not be lifted in their mother's hands. Okay, big boy, I said finally. What is it you want to tell me? He looked down, tugged at the oversized shirt Nolan had insisted I put on him before we went to bed, and twiddled his thumbs. Mommy, you know how Lisa couldn't let Joseph Joestar know she was his mother because she was trying to protect him? Green eyes peeked from beneath full lashes, first at me, then Nolan. I just want you to know that I understand why I couldn't know my daddy until yesterday. You were trying to protect us, right? Tears burned behind my eyes, but who is this Lisa chic again? It's an anime, father and son said simultaneously, rolling their eyes. I raised my hand in surrender. Okay, don't fight me for not knowing this, Joseph Morgan and Lisa. I knelt in front of my little boy. He smiled at me. Oh, Nolan, you are growing so fast already. I hugged him tightly, not wanting to let go. He hugged me back and laughed. Look how fast my baby is growing. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. I hugged him a while longer until he began to fiddle restlessly. Squirming out of my hug, he pulled back. Can I have more cereal now? Nolan chuckled and I shot him a dark look. I nodded at Nolan, who gladly bounded down the stairs to add more cereal to his bowl. Nolan took my hand and led me away from the landing into the hallway with the porch at the opposite end. So what now? What now? I took a deep breath. It's time I took my life into my own hands. If we are going to do this, I want to make sure I have something to offer. My sister and I used to have conversations about starting our own fashion business as kids. She was the brain behind the whole thing, of course, because Yolanda is a lot more creative, but she wants us both to run it together. I have avoided any conversation that has to do with it long enough. I'll call her and let her know I'm in. I just pray she's not too mad at me for being so blind all along. And your mom and grandma? Mom is definitely going to have my head, I laughed. I told everyone I didn't know who Nolan's father was. I was trying to protect you and hide my sins, but I guess some things cannot stay hidden forever. The only redeeming grace I have is that she would be glad to know that I'm finally taking charge of my life like I'm supposed to. He nodded with understanding. Suddenly, I remembered. Oh shit. I need to call my friend. Sophie. She must be so worried now. I made a mental note to do just that as soon as I was bathed, dressed, and settled. I looked at Nolan, lost myself in the beautiful green eyes, and slipped my arms around his waist. Thank you, I whispered. For loving you? You didn't stand a chance, he laughed. Even though he was smiling, I could see the worry in his eyes. What about you? I asked. Won't you lose everything now that you've gone against the contract? I won't exactly lose everything, but my father wasn't wise enough to make trusting friends, so that's a handicap for me. Also, some parts of his business were already flailing before I stepped in. I only needed Douglas's help to rejuvenate those failing sectors, but then he dangled the marriage with lifetime support in front of me. I was mad enough to accept it. Mad? I frowned. Mad at you, all the women in the world, my dad. No one ever noticed back then until I stepped into my dad's shoes, and even now, my dad only sees me as the means to an end. He's trying to get out of jail even though he has been denied multiple times. If he does succeed though, he expects to find his business thriving under me. Then I was mad at you because you didn't see me, but then, how could you? I never made my feelings known to you. I just watched you from afar without making the move. Would you have loved me back then? His eyes sought the truth and, honestly, I didn't have it in me to lie. For someone who has been lied to all his life, he deserved the truth from me. Yolanda used to say you had a crush on me, she swore you only had eyes for me. I told her it wasn't true because no one ever had a crush on Chantel Coco Jones, that girl who never felt good enough. Besides, anytime I tried to talk to you, you fled like I had a virus or something. So when Jason asked me out, I got sidetracked, and I felt on top of the world. If at that moment you had told me about your feelings, I don't think I would have paid them any mind when I was so blinded by what I thought was love. Seeming pleased with my answer, he smiled. And now? Now that I am rich and every woman's dream? You are at risk of losing everything, yet I'm not running away, am I? Then I caught on to the light tone in his voice. I rolled my eyes. Right, I only want you for your money, not because you make me happy or feel like a better version of myself or anything. He chuckled. Slipping his arms around my waist, he lifted me and carried me away from the porch into the hallway where he kicked the door to his bedroom open. I see I have a lot of work to do then. He laid me on the bed and crawled over me to cover my body with his. Strong hands were already sliding up my shirt when his phone rang. Cursing and grunting under his breath, Nolan slapped the bedside table in search of his phone. When he looked at the screen, his face hardened. It's Douglas. Nolan's POV. And he wants to see me as soon as possible. I guided my car to the parking lot of Douglas Grant's company. Personally, I would rather spend the day showing Chantel all the sensitive parts of her body and how each of them responded to my touch while my son remains preoccupied downstairs with the shitload of animes and cartoon shows I had going on TV, but the sooner I deal with this the better. Apparently, some gossip magazine had gotten hold of the hot news that Lorraine and I were no longer engaged. How they got the information, I don't know. All I know is some gossip vulture is out to let the whole world know about it, and now Douglas wants payment in blood. My blood. I walked up the stairs instead of using the elevator to better prepare myself for the meeting. I couldn't dismiss the curious glances I got. No doubt his workers must have heard the news. Nolan Pierce breaks off his engagement with Lorraine. Or as the more interesting titles put it, Nolan Pierce dumps Lorraine Grant for secretary. Great. There were a few genuine smiles and greetings though. Finally, on the floor holding Douglas's office with his name written on a nameplate in front of the door, I took a deep breath, pushed it open and walked in. Bob sat at one side, Lorraine on the other, and there, behind the large mahogany desk sitting on a plush leather chair, was Douglas Grant. What did I expect? I expected Douglas to rise in rage. I expected him to overturn his office in anger. I expected him to demand that I pour my blood out as a sacrifice for him. I expected anything but the wide-toothed smile he offered when he rose to his feet and held his hands out. He wasn't holding them out to hug me, mind you, he just held them out. Nolan, what took you so long? I squared my shoulders and walked in. Bob was watching, Lorraine was still seething. Hearing her father speak in such a friendly tone to me, she rose from her lounge on the chaise to glare at him. Douglas's office was set up like that of a 16th-century lord. There was antique furniture, the rugs were antique, and the priceless ceramics that should have been in a museum now stood on stands. They were probably hundreds of years old. How he acquired them I will never know. Even the chaise on which Lorraine lounged had a large handmade embroidery of a garden scene on it. Everything about his office was imposing. It was meant to remind me of the caliber of man I was about to mess with. Still glaring at her father, she swung her heeled feet to the ground. Dad? He looked at her and smiled easily. Sweetie, I know you expect me to have him beaten and thrown on the streets, but... He shrugged. Business doesn't work that way. He moved from behind the desk and came to lean in front of it with his arms crossed. Everyone in the room, myself included, watched him. Bob, he said suddenly, his voice frigid. Your job here is done, you can leave now. It was Bob's turn to look surprised, although I couldn't say for sure who was more surprised between him and me. His brows shot up at the abrupt dismissal. But, sir. You are done here. You can leave now. Slowly he rose with his brows still lowered over his eyes in confusion. I didn't have it in me to gloat when he passed by me, giving me a blank stare. Soon the heavy door closed behind him. I turned back to Douglas. I see you don't need him trailing my ass like a savage dog anymore. Douglas grinned genially. Did I ever need him for that? Come, he invited, gesturing to the sofa Bob was sitting on when I came in. Have a seat, my boy, we are not strangers. He moved to get a whiskey and 2 glasses from an old shelf in the corner. When I sat down, Lorraine rose. Her eyes were wild with the promise of revenge, but her hands were tied. She couldn't do anything without Daddy dearest. Dad, this isn't what you should be doing. Inviting our enemy to sit and drink is not the right way to get things done. And what is the right way? Throw him out on the streets. Douglas laughed like he had just heard the funniest thing. Throw the son of Simone Pierce on the streets? My sweetie, you don't know how these things work. Why don't you take your credit cards and go shopping with one of your friends? You need it to recover from this. Lorraine flung herself on the chaise again. But the headlines, Daddy. The newspapers, the magazines, the gossip, everything. I will put in a few calls, Douglas said quickly, impatient to get her out so that we could talk business, whatever business was. This seemed to placate her. My goodness. Was she always a brat? I hadn't noticed just how much of a brat she was when we started the contract. My Chantal, on the other hand. She snatched her designer purse from the chaise and gave me a dirty look on her way to the door. As soon as the door was closed, Douglas turned serious. The whiskey he poured out for me remained untouched, but his was drained. He refilled it twice before leaning against the desk again. As you can see, Lorraine is not pleased with you, and neither am I. I waited for him to go on. He wasn't expecting me to apologize, was he? You had such promise. With your intelligence, skills, and my money, we could have become an immovable duo. So you can wake up one day and dismiss me like you just did Bob? I quipped. He smiled again, something about that smile put me on the edge. Nolan, you see me as the villain, but I'm not. Bob is a nobody. You, on the other hand, are the son of my old pal, Simone Pierce. Believe me or not, people fear and respect you just as much as they did your father. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, you know? Throwing you out would be a mistake. I raised a brow at the unexpected words. But then again, I had expected him to try to hold on to me using my father's prestige as leverage. What he doesn't know, however, is that I don't plan to continue to depend on my father's name. It has brought me nothing but more wolves and vultures sniffing up my behind for a chance to use me as always. My plan, which I haven't told Chantal yet, is to start my own building company. I had the resources, I had the brainpower. Now all I need are competent and loyal people with me. Fiona would be a perfect candidate. The girl is smart, quick, and skillful. The chance Douglas would not give her no matter how many times I submitted her works to him would now be hers. His loss, my gain. This is my proposal, Douglas said, bringing my mind back from the future to the present. He was watching me with those greedy, hungry eyes. I'm listening. Good. There is bad blood between us now, and I'd like to correct that. Your father's businesses are far from saved, and I know you still need all the help you can find to get on your feet. I volunteer. I raised my brow. My father's company is not mine. If I chose not to save his company and properties, I let them rot to the ground. He's not here to question me. Besides, you've tricked me once before. Why should I accept this proposal of yours? He held out his hands again in a show of harmlessness. Because there are no tricks involved this time. I chewed on the inside of my cheek. I should tell him to go to hell. I did nothing wrong in falling in love with Chantal. I shouldn't have to bargain just to be with the one I love. Need I remind you that the world out there is a battlefield? There are youngsters, even younger than you, waiting for their big break, and they will scoop up any offer for a chance like the one I offer you today. I will not be scooping any more of your bullshit. True, but remember what the world was before you stepped into your father's shoes. Remember the hatred, the scorn, the malice, the shadow you were before you became Nolan Pierce. You wouldn't want that kind of life for your son, do you? I could just hear the gloat in his voice as he spoke. The more he spoke, the angrier I got. Angry because he was right. The world out there was cruel, and who knows what it would do to the son of Simone Pierce. As much as I hated to admit it, a deal with Douglas would secure my future, especially when I finally got the license to start up my business. When I looked up at Douglas, I found him studying me. He knew what I was thinking, knew that this offer was too delicious to pass up. I took a deep breath, calling myself a million names when I finally nodded. Spill it. He was behind his desk and back before I could blink. He held 2 thin manila envelopes, one of which he tossed at me. In the envelope were 2 sheets of paper with a detailed contract on them. I looked up at him. The last contract we had was as thick as a volume of an encyclopedia. I had my lawyer wake up at 2 this morning to draw up this contract, he laughed. He wasn't too happy to be awoken that early to draw up a new contract. Something was fishy. Why the rush? Because the duration of this contract is just 6 months. It's no longer a lifetime contract like our previous one. I narrowed my eyes. What is the catch? At this, Douglas smiled wider. You are a lot like your father than you think. I ignored the burning compliment. And you are learning quickly. Well, the catch, my dear boy, is simple. If you read through the contract, you'll see that your freedom from our previous contract will be marked by the construction of my new hotel within the next 6 months. I will own the hotel, and you will design it according to my plan. You see, that's a 50-50% deal. You still haven't told me the catch, I reminded him. His words sounded so simple. I would be a fool to trust him. Patience, my boy. He withdrew a cigarette pack from his pocket and offered it to me. I shook my head no. I don't trust Douglas one bit. The whole contract still sounds sketchy to me. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it. The catch is this, within the next 6 months, we will both do our parts in building this hotel. If it is ready before the contract duration, all of my properties, shares and holdings and that hotel will become yours. My eyes widened. Surely I didn't hear him properly, and if I did I must be misunderstanding. Douglas laughed. You heard me right. You can agree that we have used enough of each other in the past. It is time for either or both of us to be compensated for the time and resources wasted. But be warned, Nolan. Imagine the unending possibilities open to you if you complete this project. His eyes turned to the cold eyes of those of the brutal men I knew him to be. If you fail on your part, all of your father's property becomes mine. The silence after he finished speaking was so loud that my ears popped. I looked down at the 2 sheets of paper in my hands detailing the contract. A warm hand fell on my shoulder and I looked up to find Douglas staring down at me. This is the best offer the son of Simone can get. Use it well. If you wish, you can study the contract and have a lawyer look at it, but you'll find that I have only repeated everything written there, so maybe you should spare yourself that unpleasant stress. I shrugged his hand off. I will read it, thank you, I muttered. But 2 hours later, after reading and rereading the contract, it turned out that everything was just as he said. It was absurd. It was unbelievable. It was uncharacteristic for a man like Douglas Grant to give such an outrageous offer, especially to me. When I left his office still reeling from the heady feeling of such a generous offer, I called Paul and had him call his best lawyers to read through every nook and cranny of the contract for any sign of trickery. There was none. 2 days later, confident that Douglas wasn't up to anything, I called him up to give him my response. I'm in. Good, was his response. Let's get this unpleasantry behind us. 2 weeks later, I invited Fiona to join me in drawing up the plans for the hotel. An 18th-floor classic hotel with an 18th-century design called Ace Haven.